So welcome to this final episode of TourTech. It feels like it's been quite a ride. We've met so many different businesses and also digitalization experts who've been helping those businesses from all across Europe. And I'm joined here with Marie, which is a true delight. Marie, I have to say, huge congratulations for the amazing work you've done connecting with so many different businesses and gathering all of those points of views and perspectives throughout what has been a really, really insightful series. So why don't you tell us a little bit about why we're gathered here today? Why did we decide to do things a little bit differently for the last episode?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for listening to us all along this podcast series. And to end this series, we have today with us the Tourbit partners, because we are a consortium of 7 countries. Today, we are delighted to be joined by Sandra from the Catalan Tourism Board, by Véronique from Belgium, she's working for hub.brussels, by Eija from Lapland University in Finland, and by Asta from Iceland Tourism Board from Iceland.
So it's really great to meet all of you guys. First of all, a big welcome to TourTech. You've been listening, but not joining until now. So let's have a quick roundtable of everybody here. Tell us a little bit about your roles and I think your involvement in the project. Perhaps I'll start with you, Sandra.
Hi, hello. It's a pleasure to be here with you for this last podcast. I am Sandra. I work for the Catalan Tourism Board. The Catalan Tourism Board has been leading the Tourbit project, and I have been with the management of the project during these almost 3 years.
Yes, you've certainly been quite a face and figure for the project. I know everybody's got to know you very, very well during the last few years. And Veronique from Hub Brussels, tell us a little bit about your role.
Hi, everybody. I'm Véronique. I'm actually from Hub Brussels. I'm in charge of the hospitality.brussels cluster, and I was a partner in this project. Very interesting project for our network of 100 companies in Brussels.
That's a lot of impact that you can share with your network there in Brussels. And Asta, you're from the Icelandic tourism cluster, right?
Yes, that's true. And we have been partners in this project from the beginning, and so much learning and so much activities going on. And I can't believe it's 3 years already. That's almost over. So yeah, such a pleasure to be involved in all of these topics. And this podcast is just amazing.
And Eija, tell us a little bit about the Lapland University of Applied Science and your role in this project.
Yes, hi everybody, and regards from Lapland, Finland. We have been a partner responsible much about the learning phase of the project. My role has been a Lapland team leader as a project management, and it has been a really, really interesting project with lots of activities. So we have been happy to participate in the project.
So, Marie, you have been the glue that has tied all of this together through the series. And as I said, I think you've done an amazing job. And we're going to jump in today to explore all of those different perspectives. But before we do that, what would you say for you has stood out and made this really a unique project to work on?
So the podcast series allows us to meet many different people from different area, from different also functions. And it was not only sharing about the digitalization journey of tourism SMEs, but also to benefit from the advice of these founders, of these entrepreneurs. So when you listen to each episode, you can gain insight on artificial intelligence, chatbot, chat voice, digital experiences, but you can also learn from the advice of entrepreneurs that you need to fail, you need to take risks, you need to be patient. And it's a really good reminder when you are running your business to be aware that everyone is struggling the same way as you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's certainly been quite a refreshing aspect in listening to all of the different discussions that you've been having with those SMEs. Well, I guess it's probably good as we end the series to also think about how we began. And I would invite yourself, Sandra, to tell us a little bit more about Tourbit and what its objectives were, what's the scope, and what have you achieved when you kind of think that we're right now at the very end of this 3-year project? I know it's been really, really impressive. So I'm really keen to kind of hear it directly from the horse's mouth, so to speak.
Indeed. So actually, the Tourbit project started, or the main goal of the project, of the Tourbit project, was to support the digital uptake of tourism SMEs. And in order to do so, we created a scheme based on three main pillars. That these pillars mainly relate to the principal blocking areas when it comes to digitalization of tourism SMEs. No, it relates to knowledge, it relates to contacts, connecting with service providers, and it relates also to investment. So we created these three main pillars, and in each main pillar, we developed different activities to support them to go through this digitalization process. So in the pillar of learning, for example, they were able to assess in which maturity level of digitalization they were. They received also a lot of trainings, capacity building sessions related to different technologies, but also related to different skills that it's important for them to uptake in order to work through this digitalization process. And we also created some trend books in order for them to understand what are the most trendy technologies nowadays and how they are adopted in the tourism world. So this one was a main pillar. Another pillar was related to building connections between the SMEs and the tech providers. And this is something we have seen very much. Actually, there is a lack of connection. They don't know each other. And the SMEs, that when they want to improve the digitalization, they don't know where to go. And I think we have provided very, very, very good support in this regards. We have created an online community, which is the Tourbit community, where there are around 1,400 members. But we also did some co-creating workshops where actually we put together the SMEs with their challenges and to see how, through the support of the service providers, they were able to cope with some of them. And another activity we did was this podcast, actually, that aims us to show how, by working together, they solve these barriers, no, and they are able to progress in the digitalization uptake. And also we did a matchathon that actually was super challenging to organize, but it was very, very, very successful because it enabled these tourism SMEs to meet directly the service providers and then to work together for the implementation of the digital projects. And last but not least, we organized this testing pillar that actually is where we dedicated direct financial support to 61 tourism SMEs for the implementation of their pilot digitalization project. So this was the idea, and we managed very successfully, I think, to overcome to all these activities. And at the end of the project, more or less, we have been providing support to around 700 tourism SMEs in Europe, which is a lot. And I think it's very, very rewarding to listen to them and to hear about their experience.
It's a really, really impressive scale of impact when you think about how significant that impact is for so many businesses. And I think it really highlighted problems very early on where you could use this funding to support and make those connections. As you say, a lot of businesses sometimes aren't really aware of the kind of providers that could help them to address different issues or to really explore the potential of new technologies. And I've seen it firsthand myself, just how incredible that is when you give that little bit of extra support, that those different partners come together. I love the term matchathon as well. I'm definitely going to use that. It's a great term to think about how we get people connecting and really collaborating together. Let's have a quick tour de table, if we want to say it like that, to see what everybody here with us today thinks about the key takeaways for them. What do you think the biggest achievements are when you think about, when you reflect on the last 3 years of the Tourbit project? Who wants to jump in first?
Maybe I can. Because in Belgium, what we really appreciated was really the major push towards digital transformations. And as Sandra told us, thanks to the Digital Acceleration Program, many tourism SMEs in Belgium received financial support, but also expert mentorship. And that has really helped them to implement their new digital projects. So all this boosted their digital skills, and that has made them more competitive, more innovative. So we've really played a crucial role by connecting all these local tourism businesses with the digital startups. And now they can work more efficiently using all these advanced digital solutions. So it was great.
It seems like it also encourages us to think differently about how we approach things like training and things we've traditionally done in a very standardized way. And this has been a much more direct intervention, and it seems to have really paid off.
I also think, if I can add to this, that this was so helpful for the companies also to see that it doesn't need to be super complicated to start, because it's often such a gap between like technology and like an SME, like a small medium company in the countryside, maybe to it's a little bit intimidating to start some kind of a digital journey. But this project, it kind of was cutting the elephant in a really nice bite, so they could start, and they could also mirror each other in other similar companies all around Europe. That I think is super important also. But also for the companies, like in Iceland, there were 7 participating companies taking part, and they also started to work more together and more like in this peer support, being like elevating on what each other was doing and so forth. And they were doing such a different projects also. So, and the journey isn't over yet. And that is also so important with a project that we start like this, that this is just a milestone, and then we are responsible to take it forward and build on what we have now after this start. So that's also a great learning.
Also in Lapland, this funding, European Union find a way to fund micro-sized companies and SMEs. I think it is excellent thing. And here in Finland, 8 companies out of 10, they were micro-sized, mamas and papas companies, really small. And they have this kind of challenge of not getting help for their digitalization challenges because they don't have any time. They are doing business. So this money and this support help them to have this kind of private consultancy only for them. Here in Lapland, we have lots of training in digitalization, but they are most of them big webinars. And when the companies have time to participate, they don't understand half of what are these digital experts saying. So this was really great that the small companies, they could discuss with the digital expert, with the service provider who understood, and they were keen to explain also what they don't know already, because many times the companies are shy to tell what they actually know, and they don't know about digitalization. It's a big thing, and commonly when we were talking about big terms and to see that they are the basic things that the micro-sized companies they need. Basic help with the basic things.
I think that's really something important to stress what you just said, Eija, because we as industry experts, as the different organizations that sometimes put together these support programs, sometimes can easily lose that contact with businesses. And actually, this project has done exactly the opposite. It's got everybody really, really connecting on a very down to earth level, at the level that's right for those businesses, and not just overwhelming them with big trends and big opportunities that are happening in the digital space, but directly seeing what small steps and small actions could make a difference to their business. And it seems from the interviews that by doing, it's also starting to move them in a different direction and shift that mindset issue that we often talk about when we discuss digitalization. Marie, you're also sitting there with the Paris & Co hat on. We sometimes forget that because you've interviewed so many businesses from all of the different European partners. But what would you say stood out for you amongst the SMEs that you were coordinating?
Like everyone, the SMEs were really grateful to have a roadmap. Actually, as Eija said, they are often small enterprises from 1 to 10 employees, so it's super small. So they have so many things to do and they can get lost. But Tourbit, we gave them a roadmap on 3 years. So first, we helped them to understand their needs, and from their needs, we built digitalization acceleration program to really fit what they wanted to digitalize. So they were happy about the roadmap. They were also happy about the connection. Now a few SMEs are talking to each other to see what they have done and what they can done maybe together. And what is great is now they have started their digitalization journey. They have so many things on their to-do list. They want to stay competitive. because don't forget that digitalization is going fast, and if you don't need this extra help, you can get lost. So European project is also a way to have guidelines.
One of the things I noticed, especially with some of the French SMEs, were that they were actually very, very conceptual. I think this really stood out for me. They were really experimenting with big ideas, which are really ambitious and bold. And they require really a very smart application of technology for things like automation and personalization. And it also seems that for many of the SMEs that you were working with, that they really benefited from having, I think, as Eija was saying, that consultant that could sit with them and figure out how to solve that problem or how to build that solution. And sometimes these are not things that can be templated. They have to start with what's that idea and really experiment with technology to see if you can achieve that.
Yeah, in the Tourtech podcast, actually, we learned that it's okay to not be able to do everything, but just surround yourself with a good person and you will go super fast and super far.
Absolutely. So I guess that brings us to a great point, the podcast itself. We've had so many episodes. I think this will be the last day we say, see you next Monday. In fact, we've already done that. So that was my favorite part of it, definitely. But let's see what everybody thought really stood out for them, having listened to some of the discussions that have happened on a week-to-week basis. Who wants to jump in with their first kind of standout thoughts?
Well, I could say something about that SMEs and digital companies, these service providers, it is so important for them to find a common language to each other, to understand each other. And that was obvious that in the podcasts that they were able to discuss the matters, very technical matters sometimes. And also the tourism business, the service providers, they should understand what is happening in tourism business in order to be able to give good service and good support to the tourism company. So I think it was very great that they found a common language between them and they could discuss on the same level about their needs and the solutions.
Certainly. And actually, that really makes me think of some of the different interviews that I found most interesting were often where there was a service provider who didn't actually understand the nuances and specific challenges of tourism, but they learnt that in the process of working with the SME. So I think it's a great point that also for those digital companies that are doing amazing things, tourism is an industry with a lot of opportunity. Actually, I think a lot of creativity, we sometimes don't give ourselves credit. We often say that this is an industry that's behind other sectors. And I don't think that's entirely true. It's perhaps has more challenges because of seasonality and because of the size of the businesses. But I think you make a really good point, Eija, that if those service providers take the time to understand tourism, it's also quite exciting in terms of how technology can create really interesting and fascinating experiences that benefit both visitors, but obviously in the Tourbit, we're looking to also make sure that the businesses get stronger with this support.
Yeah, and it leads to innovations. That is also important. When they discuss with each other, there's new innovations coming up.
To maybe build on that, I really, because we have after COVID been thinking a lot about how to rethink tourism, how to rebuild tourism, and I really believe that we can use this digital innovation to rebuild and rethink tourism. And my favorite topics around digital tourism or digital innovation or travel tech, they always connect those big sisters of sustainability and technology. So we need to use the innovation to kind of foster those big pillars that are changing, and we really need to support our companies in also implementing it into the companies. And I think especially episode, was it 3 and 10, that was really focusing on this technology to be an enabler for sustainability, and also in the following, like how this can really help the companies being more structured towards the staff members and employees and so on. So instead of being afraid of the technology and what it will steal from you or take from you, you kind of see the opportunities in how it can make your job so much more fun and so much more enjoyable also.
Yeah, and I think this big priority to make this transition towards sustainable business practices, it's not easy for businesses. And sometimes they don't necessarily see the reason they need to make this change. It might be seen as something that's very costly and not at least necessary from a business point of view. And I think what we saw with some of the experiments that were set up were opportunities to test how they could even use smart automations to change how they manage energy within a business. I thought that was just really a big eye opener, right through to communicating more effectively the impact of someone's visit. So I think it definitely seems to be necessary to also financially support these shifts towards different ways of doing things, because it what I learned from this was as soon as a business has experimented or tried, they are usually convinced, not always. I think Marie will definitely point to one or two where they were actually quite frustrated. They found it was really difficult to make those transformations. But on the whole, they were very inspired by those changes. And they basically said, we're going to now continue to do this, even once the funding support has run out. So I think that's obviously really important.
Also interesting to see how they are not scared about going for these new very trendy technologies. There was one that they were talking about voice bots and on artificial intelligence, no, and how they have been working together. And I thought it was impressive how a hotel, they can be thinking on using this artificial intelligence in the form of a voice bot in order to support the phone calls and to support their personnel working in the front desk and the reservations and everything. So I thought it was, yeah, like very inspiring on this regards, and also very daring, no, from their side, like being able to do this. And from this, what you were saying also before, there was a lot they were discussing a lot, and I think it relates very much also to the Tourbit SMEs that have been receiving the financial support, is about having this open-minded. At the end, they are not working anymore like a service provider or like a contractor. They are part of a team. And what they are trying to do is really try to solve some challenges that the SME has and try to see how they can adapt the technical solution they have developed to solve their challenges. And this is something I like very much. Is not that the SME that needs to adapt to the technology solution that we have, but we need to adapt our technology solution to the needs that the SME has. And if for this we need to work harder or to meet farther or to, I don't know, I think most of them, they have also even dedicated more time that they were supposed to do. But in order really to deliver the needs that the SME has and to support them in this process, because as you were saying also before, it's an opportunity at the end also for the technological provider, because actually there has a lot of scalability options later on. So it's like a very interesting, I think, teamwork where both of them are kind of pilots, one for the technological solution and the other for the solution that they're going to be implementing. And they're interested, I think, both of the sides in making sure that this works along well. So that's, I thought it was super interesting to hear from the podcast and also to hear from the SMEs that received the grants by the interviews we had with them. So they have like this joint feeling.
That's certainly true. And the opportunity that was created for those technology providers, I think, is something I'm not sure. Maybe you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm not sure if this was the main focus in terms of the beneficiaries of this. But I think it was very obvious, as you say, that actually at the end of it, the vast majority of providers had also really benefited. And I'm not surprised at all to think that they may have invested a lot more than the budget supported, because I think there is that shared belief in what they're doing. Bookline, I think if there's one I have to quote, I think Bookline, and I know it's a Spanish company, a Catalan company, if I'm not mistaken, that just has the most amazing technology. And to see that something like running a voice bot to automate and to respond to calls, and to see the business case there as well, for a small hotel to say, well, I can't answer the phone at 3 o'clock in the morning, or I can't speak to a customer who's in Japan and has critical questions. or I'm too busy because it's not easy running a hotel and I can't spend 15 minutes discussing and giving all the prices to a customer, but the bot can give them everything they need and I can just pick up at the right point. I think that was really a big eye opener because I've worked in digital for all my career, and this is the sort of technology that you would expect the very, very biggest global players to be investing in. And you would also say this is really only going to be affordable for those kind of huge global multinational companies. And actually, you see an example of a great tech solution by what I believe is a SME and a great application of that by another SME. And somehow the economic impact of this project then is not only the tourism industry and the tourism SMEs, it's also the tech sector that may be also working with other industries and other sectors. But this has also helped to really boost that. So I totally agree with you, Sandra. That was really something that I think shows us we also need to think a little bit differently. Maybe Veronique, because Hub Brussels has a wider kind of economic role as well to support other sectors as well. Is that something you would agree with?
Yes, because a question that we receive regularly is, for example, is technology going to kill our jobs in the tourism industry? And what surprised me in the different podcasts is that you can see that innovative technologies, the AI tools, they are super useful for the travel companies. But however, we've seen that it's really important and even crucial, actually, to keep a human touch and to keep the personal interaction during this digitalization process if you want to truly connect with your customers. And I remember an example of a company trying to improve its search engine optimization's performance, but in another language. And they show how important it is to rely on human expertise for accurate and culturally relevant translations, because that improves user experience and SEO performance. So for me, it was really interesting through this podcast to see the link between human intervention and technologies. That was really interesting.
Yeah, and I think also, as you say, sometimes very ordinary things that we maybe don't give enough attention to because they're not new and exciting. But something like SEO, I remember that episode as well. It's something that has been a priority when we think about digitalization for more than 15 years. And so we probably assume that it's not that important today to look at that and to consider different approaches to that. And working with different languages is also something we know is important, but I think that really revealed how technology is changing rapidly, how things like AI are enabling us to revisit things like translation, how we communicate, and also the impact of something like AI on SEO and the need to still get that right in terms of the human aspect. So I think it was also quite interesting to just see how very ordinary digital topics shouldn't be overlooked, but it seems to be really in the detail that businesses are finding opportunity. Maybe not so exciting, but it's really important to look at every little detail and see how can today's technologies allow us to open new opportunities and improve. So I guess, Marie, you've met with every single business through this series, so nobody knows them better than you. And I know that you had a lot of takeaways when it comes to entrepreneurs themselves, what they showed you and what you learned from them. What would you say really stood out to you?
Yeah, you have to add up one step at a time approach. Don't try to change everything. Just have a clear roadmap and do things in the right order. And it's okay if you fail. It's okay if it doesn't work because this is how you will learn. So you can start small, but just start. Don't be afraid to start, to take some risk. If you are surrounded by the right service provider, by a team that is that a team that is supporting you and also that is happy to be trained, you can move forward and you can achieve really a great digitalization journey that will help you to increase your sales, your customer satisfaction, your brand image. It's not only your digital processes, but it's also everything that is around your business. And there is one thing that is common to all the episodes is the data monitoring. Everyone is in the Tourtech podcast is monitoring the data to understand the key performance indicator, what can be improved, what should be changed, what is working. So when you start a project, it can be digitalization, but it can be in any topics. Just make sure you have key data you track to see where you can improve. And you have free tools to monitor that. You don't need to go and take the amazing tool. You have Google Analytics. You can add extension to your website to understand what page where people are going the most and so on. So just don't forget when you start something, have objectives and monitor your data.
Yeah, I think everybody's talking about data-driven marketing, the data economy, and all of these opportunities. And as you say, this was something that every business is actually aware of. But the providers they worked with somehow were the storytellers of that data for them. And I think that's maybe, as we reach the end of our discussion today, this is maybe something to reflect on is, can we play a different role in how we support businesses in our local industry? Can we be more hands-on with them? Can we help them to interpret and see opportunities? I think just thinking about that question of data, it's indeed something we all have, but there are still problems. We don't necessarily understand the data. We don't necessarily have the confidence to take time to manipulate or dig deeper in the data. So we had a number of people saying that they struggled to connect all the different data they had, that everything sits in a different place. And so that's quite a big challenge. But as you say, they were all moving forwards because of the data. And somehow in the end, that data was helping them to see what was going well, what was going wrong, where they were having successes. And the providers seem to be in part the translators of that data. They were able to look at it and build a story around it and help those SMEs to really see what was happening in their business, and it provided that intelligence. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts on data or indeed any of the other opportunities that you saw coming out of this series, which maybe lead you to think about what's next for you as you consider the priorities for SMEs in tourism looking forward.
If I can jump in just here in the end, I think also what we provided, and when I was interviewing all our companies in Iceland, I found out the similarity or the red thread with them all was that this project and the participation in the project gave them the frame of starting and working in the frame, because of course they had funding and they had this mentoring and all of the program around it, but it still gave them this opportunity to sit down and really dive into what they needed to do. But they didn't only do the bare minimum of what the project was asking them to do. They did so much more. So the effect, like we were talking about here earlier, the ripple effect in the community also in the ecosystem, and also regarding how much money they spent more than the funding. I mean, some of them were spending 3 or 4 times the funding. So I think that is also this economic ripple effect that we are seeing. And that is something that we really take out of this as a learning curve also for the continuing support for many more companies in our ecosystem.
I fully agree with what you are saying, Asta. And also, I think that this frame, or at least what they were telling us, is that they feel secured also. So they feel like, okay, so we have this framework where we can start working together and we can discuss and we collaborate. But if something goes wrong, we have our local contact points that are backing us. No, so at the end, these interviews, for example, we were having with them, this contact support that they knew they could get. At the end, they were super independent. I think most of the SMEs, and they went through the project implementation very good. But this was also like making them feel that they are kind of coached also, no, from another side, and that our only will is that they go through their digitalization project successfully. So we're not going to be there, pointing out whatever this you have not done it. So we were very flexible on the deviations and so on. But I think that's a very important also take away from a European project, that fact of to these SMEs, it really gives this framework and this security space to be able to pilot a new thing that they are maybe not used to do.
Yeah, and I think to that point, you cannot underestimate the importance of the work that you've all done as partners. I can say that because I am not a partner in this project. We've just supported the podcast series, and I can definitely see this role that you play in coordinating is really, really important. And perhaps, as you said, Sandra, quite quickly the conversations and the collaboration with the business takes off and it works really well, but the knowledge that you're there to support it, the expectations, which are not too strict, so they can define their own path without the pressure of needing to present a very predefined set of results. I think this is definitely given the support they need and also the commitment on both partners to see it through to the very best that they can. So I think you all deserve a round of applause.
I think there has been a lot of commitment, and just because as project coordinator, but I think that as Catalan Tourism Board coordinating the project, it has been a lot of commitments from the partners, but a lot of caring. I would say caring, like really caring for the SMEs, making sure that the voice of the SMEs and of their local SMEs is kind of represented in the project activities that we were aiming to do, so that they were able to benefit from them. And I think that this has been impressive work, really, to make these very strong ties locally from each of the partners.
Yeah. Aya, what would you say has been the legacy of this for you from your perspective? What will you carry forward into the future?
Well, the trust issue is one of the things. We are a university here in Lapland and we work very closely in our tourism ecosystem together with the stakeholders. But this kind of project gave also us a better understanding, not only with the tourism companies, but the service providers in digitalisation. So it has been very important. It also showed us, as you said, about the data management. It is important for us as a region to invest in the future steps of this data management. And we are very much committed to that one because as we are an organization supporting tourism business, so we have to be also able to see that what is this enabling point that we can do as a university to support. So this is important. I would also like to say that it has been very, not only in this podcast, but also with webinars that we have had, like loads of them. It has been really eye opening because we all think that in our country the best specialists are. But it has been eye opening to see in European wide between these 7 countries that how great experts and specialists we have all over. And they are willing to share their knowledge. And that has been really, really nice to see and to work also in the future with them.
That's indeed very true. And I think one of the things that I picked up on was the cultural variation in how those tech companies work, think, and the kind of solutions they develop. I think this is quite nuanced, but often they work with very different skill sets or very different problems that they're trying to solve, which are brought about by the environment in which they're in. So it's important kind of not to underestimate how those cultural and geographic influences can shape how even a digital business will find its way and put its creativity into what it does. And I think somehow that's been a big benefit to see all of that mixed up and to see so many different approaches and solutions brought to the table. So, Veronique, what would you say for you is the legacy of this project?
Well, as I'm in charge of the cluster hospitality in Brussels, I think that this project has really shown that it is important to regularly question your business practices and to improve them, because that creates a culture of innovation. And innovation, digitalization, that's really crucial and important in a world that is in constant evolution, and certainly in the travel industry. So that's certainly a learning that I will keep for the members of the cluster hospitality.
So, Marie, we have now reached the end of the series. How would you reflect on everything that we've done together, that you've been involved in with the project as a whole. And I think maybe the personal connection with so many amazing people who you've had the chance to sit down and discuss with.
To be honest, it's been quite a journey. Maybe you heard it was the first time for Paris and Co to be part of a podcast, but we really like the experience. And most of all, we really like meeting people from different countries to understand their problematics, how they solve them. And as an example, now I know all these guests, I am able to make connections between the needs of my local SMEs with the guests from the podcast. So I wrote to a guest from hub.brussels recently. I also asked advice to another guest from Portugal to help our SMEs. So if you listen to all the podcast series episode, I will highly advise you to contact the guest directly on LinkedIn or through the website because they are really accessible. It's not because we have done a podcast that they are somewhere far away from you. No, you can really contact the startups or also the SMEs to share experience with them. This is also the really power and beauty of Tourbit is to create connections. So as a listeners, even if you are not part of Tourbit project, it's fine. Don't be afraid to contact the guest if you need to know more about the digitalization you would like to implement.
Indeed. And certainly, I think both this speaks for the tourism SMEs who seem to really enjoy and actually feel quite flattered if somebody would like to understand how they've done something. So I think reach out to them or reach out to Tourbit who can put you in touch. But also, as you say, the technology providers who I'm sure will be delighted if you're impressed with their technology to hear from you. What I would take away from this, and I think the whole team here at the Digital Tourism Think Tank, is a sense of humbling humility. We have just found it so brilliant to hear from so many small but really, really important examples of digitalization. And it keeps us grounded. And I think the way in which you've had those different conversations and allowed them to share the trials and tribulations. There were a few frustrations amongst a lot of successes, but I think that was also really great to hear as well, because it's perhaps reassuring for all those businesses which are finding it quite difficult to implement or to put in place new technologies or stay competitive. And I think there's just so much food for thought. I've also had a lot of conversations with people who have said, we've been listening to the series and it's an eye opener just because it's so down to earth and the problems are quite simple sometimes. The solutions can be quite tricky, but at the same time, very achievable. And I think this has definitely been something which was unexpected. We go in with the assumption that these big, exciting developments are something that everybody should be embracing. And in fact, they can be really small iterations that make the real difference. So I guess on that note, we can close today's discussion. Thank you to all of you and congratulations to all of the partners here, but I think also to the entire Tourbit team. Sandra, do you want to say a last word on Tourbit?
Before you close the TourTech podcast, I think that you deserve a huge, huge, huge thank you message because Nick and Marie, the work that you have been doing with this podcast has been amazing. I think that you have dedicated a lot of efforts. It's the first time Tourism EU project does podcast. So honestly, I think that we have set the basis for a lot of podcasts now on tourism in the EU projects, but really you had a huge challenge in front of you and you succeeded enormously. So thank you very much for creating so much value actually, and for very, very, very much for your time dedicated to that.
Thank you, Sandra. I know it means a lot to both myself and Marie, and it's been fun. It's been quite a ride. Maybe Marie will say, see you next Monday, hit subscribe, even if perhaps it's not the next Monday, but we'll certainly connect again very soon and bring a fresh set of perspectives in the near future. Thanks to all of you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
See you.